shoot, I spilt my wine on my lines. I spilt my lines on my wines. No, my wines on my line. This week's reject is the 4th chapter of my young adult high fantasy novel, Everwell, the story of Jeff the Boy's lost year. It was rejected by Tundra Books. Now, the cool thing about Tundra Books is in their rejection letter, they said that my novel was an opportunity that they had to pass on. So, they called it an opportunity. It was obviously something they really wanted to do. But they just, they could, pretty much, it's kind of like they didn't publish my book, but it's kind of almost like I'm a Tundra Books author anyways, at least that's how I feel about it. I'm a reject, you're a reject, I'm a reject, oh, oh, oh. I'm a reject, you're a reject, I'm a reject, oh, oh, oh. Chapter 4. Kidnapped by Kappas. Jeff did not die. He woke up. The back of his head rested on soft, cool dirt. He lay still and moved his eyes. At a glance, he recognized that he was in a new world. If he described the scene, it would not seem strange. There were rocks and trees, shrubs and dirt, all things he recognized. But they were altogether otherworldly versions of what he knew. His hands rubbed at the dirt, which felt somewhat like a sponge and somewhat like molasses, but not entirely either. The colors of the shrubs and trees were even more confusing. They were first a bright yellow and then black and then pink, depending on how you looked at it. His mind could not decide how to interpret the data, and his senses were scrambling to find a way to make sense of it all. He was in a clearing at the top of the hill, and beyond the unknown colors and textures continued as if unending.
It's so hot,
Jeff mumbled, trying to will himself to wake up. Lying on the ground, Jeff could tell it wasn't winter here. It felt more like a late summer. His snowsuit was damp with sweat. His uneasiness about this new world was no match for the weariness that sapped his body of strength. He knew he should fight the lethargy, but was unable to keep his eyes open. He fell asleep. Later, the sound of shuffling feet woke him. Fortunately, Jeff the boy was blessed with the ability of waking up with his eyes still closed. He could pretend that he was still asleep. Had he dreamt of this new world? Was he in his bed, back at home? The texture of the ground beneath his fingers confirmed he was still there. It sounded like 10 or 12 sets of feet pacing restlessly. He was rejuvenated by the adrenaline caused by those steps and who might be attached to them. He was afraid. He didn't know where he was, or worse yet, how he was going to get home, or who was now with him. He had never felt so alone, so scared. Jeff peeked through the small slits of his eyelids. A group of creatures surrounded him. They were lanky, skinny, about 7 feet tall, covered with green scales. Each sported tufts of hair around their heads that made Jeff think of a monk or his own balding dad. The tufts stood like a half-hearted guard around a hole with what looked like a cork stuck in it. Their faces were bird-like, but the few feathers they had sprouted unevenly on their upper arms. Jeff got the impression that they were not flying creatures. Their pointed beaks seemed menacing, even fierce. Sensing that the creatures were not losing interest, Jeff hopped to his feet. This sent the birds into giddy squabbles. He smiled and waved his introduction.
Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Jeff.
He backed away from them while smiling, trying to get away while not insulting them. With every step he took back, they took a step forward. They reached out their spindly, waterlogged arms, their beaks jackhammered like a threat. He knew his life was on the line. He looked around. He was in a clearing. A few yards beyond this creepy closing circle was a wood with a thick mossy floor and trees so thick it would limit how many could come after him at a time. He dove through the legs of one of the things and scrambled towards it. Before he could reach the woods, one of the birds picked him up and heaped him up on his shoulder. It bounded down the hill, away from the wooded area Jeff hoped to escape to. The hill below was open and wide. Even if he was able to pry himself out of their death grip, he couldn't lose them. The other things followed his captor in fierce pursuit. The creature's long frog-like legs jolted down ancient trails. Each step pressed Jeff's stomach against the creature's bony shoulder. He made spastic grunts as the air was forced out of him. He squirmed, but the scrawny webbed fingers held fast. He managed to struggle onto his back. From there he saw the cork embedded in the bird's skull. In desperation, Jeff grabbed frantically at the cork. A loud pop sounded as the cork fell out into the dirt. The creature immediately stopped and looked around for its cork. The gawky bird creatures behind did not slow down. They struck their friend's backside and flung both Jeff and the bird creature to the ground. Water spilt out of the thing's uncorked head. Jeff stared as it gasped for air, drowning on dry land. Jeff denied his fascination and sprung to his feet. Jeff zigzagged down the hill to avoid capture. The birds rammed each other to the ground to get a hold of him. Their balance was compromised as they pushed and slapped at each other. Jeff knew he couldn't outrun them, so he tried to outmaneuver them instead. There were 3 of them close behind. Jeff tucked himself into a ball on the ground, and the 3 tripped over him. He shot up and continued running. Another land bird made a grab for him. It knocked Jeff to his knees. One with a scar across its face picked Jeff up. This one learned the lesson from his fallen friend and did not let Jeff near his cork. It held him at an arm's length, dangling him by his feet like an inexperienced parent holding a baby for the first time. This blocked most of the creature's vision. It did not notice the rope tied from one tree to another at ankle height. The rope caught the creature's leg and launched the greasy bird into the air. It dropped Jeff. The dust kicked up a cloud where Jeff fell, and he rolled over a short embankment. He was caught by 2 chubby hands that pulled him into a cave. Jeff's enemies continued to clamber down the hillside away from him.
Thank you, sir. Who are you?
The name's Wiel, son of Bryn. What might your name be?
My name is Jeffrey Jefferson.
Well, Jeffrey, son of Jefferson, step into the light so I can get a good look at you, will you? I've never seen a first faller before.
They stepped out of the cave. Jeff looked at Wiel and proclaimed,
You're a leprechaun!
Wiel's eyes squeezed into a smile and his gentle correction followed.
I assure you, I do not happen to be a leprechaun.
Oh, really?
Wiel was about 3 feet tall. He wore brown shoes. His red hair and enormous eyebrows were synonymous with iconic leprechaun imagery. Even his outfit was green, right down to his hat.
What is a leprechaun? From the sound of the word, I imagine perhaps a diseased fish? I don't think I live up to the name.
A leprechaun is a small person who smokes a pipe, has a beard, and wears a lot of this color.
Bless me, this is me favorite color, so call me a leprechaun if you like.
Do you have gold? Leprechauns always have gold.
No, never too much as a rule. I might get too greedy for my own good. Now, let's get out of here before they come back.
Years later, Wiel was telling his story to Jeff the Man, and it was at about this point in the retelling that Jeff the Man interrupted him. Wiel had eaten over 10 egg rolls, 3 soups, 2 orders of pecan chicken, and 7 fortune cookies.
Wait. Are you telling me that you're a leprechaun?
Why, yes. I still love this color.
But you're almost 6 feet tall. Last time I checked, leprechauns were of, smaller stature.
Wiel lowered his voice, his cheeks tied in firm knots above a childish grin.
It's a disguise trick. Works every time.
His laugh burst out but stopped short as he remembered.
We should leave. It should be wearing off soon.
Well, Wiel, son of Bryn, was it? Do you have any money to help pay for the numerous meals you've ordered?
I never do, as a rule.
Jeff finished his sentence, reaching for his wallet with a heavy sigh.
Because you don't want to become too greedy for your own good.
That's right, Jeffrey.
Wiel replied, not taking stock in the sarcastic edge.
Listen, Wiel, it's been entertaining and all, hearing your story, but I need to go home and get some sleep. I work in the morning. Is there some place I can drop you off?
As Jeff finished his sentence, he looked over the top of the car. Wiel was gone. There was a light tapping on the window. He looked over to see a 3.5-foot dwarfy character with large pointy ears at his window. Jeff stared as his disbelief melted away. He found his voice was quieter and more modest than it was just moments before.
Get in the car.